Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Feldhouse here for another episode of Caffeine Connect, where we sip coffee and talk business. For those new to the series, this is our monthly series where founders and business leaders share their stories, insights, and expertise. Our Patriot Boot Camp program is generously supported by T-Mobile, ESPN, and Veterans Debt Assistance. Thanks to them for making this forum possible. Join us for real talk, actionable advice, and inspiration to fuel your business journey. From startup struggles to success strategies, Caffeine Connect can be your go-to source for veteran-led entrepreneurship. We are joined today by Pete Canalichio, a former mentor, speaker, and great friend to DAV Patriot Boot Camp. After my brief introduction, Pete will take the lead. I invite you to pop any questions you have into the forum section, or you can post those on our socials. We will make sure to save plenty of time at the end for questions and answering. All right, let's get into it. Pete Canalichio is on a mission to help brands come alive in the hearts of those who experience them. An award-winning author of the Amazon #1 new release, Expand, Grow, Thrive in 2018, and most recently, Strategic Brand Licensing from 2024, Pete is also a TEDx speaker who has worked in the brand expansion and licensing industry for the past 25 years. His experience includes the U.S. Navy, the Coca-Cola Company, Newell Brands, and most recently, Brand Alive, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that he founded in 2009. Before starting his business career, though, Pete attended the U.S. Naval Academy, where he earned a Bachelor in Science in Physics. Pete went on to serve in the Navy as an award-winning aviator and instructor pilot, honing his leadership and decision-making skills as a commander of a large multi-engine aircraft and a 12-member crew during the height of Cold War tensions. Pete earned his MBA from the University of North Carolina Kenan-Flagler Business School, where he was a Richard H. Jenrette Fellow and salutatorian of his class. Throughout his career, Pete has operated in the global arena, having worked in more than 40 different countries and managed extensive projects across national and continental borders. And today, he's going to join us to advise us all on branding. Pete, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be with everyone. Thank you very much for that long, drawn out, introduction. I had no idea you were going to share all those details, but
You've done some amazing things, Pete. It's worth it, my friend.
thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited to share with everyone my presentation today and talking about personal branding and how that impacts your company brand. And so let's get into it. And, I'm going to leave time, as Matt said, afterwards to talk about Q&A. But if you have a burning question that you feel like you want to ask in the middle, please do so. I like being interrupted. I find it really adds value. And usually the questions that are asked, someone's thinking about also, so you're doing them a favor. All
Hey,
right. Well,
Pete,
yes.
as you get started, I noticed the captions are on, and that might be pulling out some of the content for people. So I don't know if you want to change those and get
Yes, I
those off.
just turned it off. Thank you so much.
Ah, rock on.
I had
Appreciate it, brother.
deselected it, but somehow it came back. So,
Hey, all good.
all right. So let me just quickly give you a couple of pictures. I know Matt did a great job on, describing my biography, but here I am flying the P-3 Orion on a deployment to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. With my taco on the left-hand side and with my crew on the right-hand side. I really loved my time in the Navy. Can't believe what I got to do and with such great, men and women. Afterwards, as Matt said, I left, went to business school, and got a degree, an MBA, and started at Coca-Cola in finance. Actually, I had studied finance because that was an area that was of interest at the time. And here I am getting to be with the Italian division on a little bit of an excursion up into the mountains to do some skiing. I left the finance division in about 5 years after I joined in 1996, and I was working for Coca-Cola in marketing and actually doing sponsorship negotiation. That's where I really understood or began to understand what it means to have a brand and why Coca-Cola would want to connect their brand with other brands like the Olympics. And here I am in 1996. At the Olympic Games, I was in charge, or not in charge, but I was helping with what they call guerrilla marketing. Guerrilla marketing is when a company will go into an area they don't have permission and try to get access for without being an official sponsor. So we were, as the official sponsor of the Olympics, trying to make sure that Pepsi wasn't present. And as it was, the Olympic Committee and the Coca-Cola Company did a good job, and that really wasn't much of a challenge for us. Here I am a couple of years later working on the Salt Lake Olympic Games, where I was overseeing the creation of all the external consumer-based activities. Like we had a 10,000 square foot tent, which was called Coca-Cola on the Ice, where consumers who maybe did or didn't have a ticket to the Olympics could come in and shoot a hockey puck, or push a bobsleigh, or ride down a luge run, or even push a curling stone. Of course, these were simulated versions, but as authentic as they could be, and giving consumers, fans of the Olympics and drinkers of Coca-Cola an opportunity to engage in the Olympics. Here I am actually with my eldest son, Andy, at the Games. A few years later, I'm working on the Sochi Olympic Games, doing a similar kind of project. And here with one of my good friend, Mikey Hersom, who worked with Coca-Cola often supporting their Olympic activation. So you've seen some pictures of me from my past all the way up to more currently. And what you hopefully saw was this idea that everything communicates. Whether I'm wearing a military uniform, a flight suit, or in a Coca-Cola outfit for the Olympic Games, or presenting today in my button-down shirt, I'm communicating something to you. And that's a really important thing I want everybody to realize as we go forward in this conversation, because it's so important. So let me show you a couple of pictures of what I mean. So the first one is here is a color guard, right? This is a color guard made up of all of the military representation, right? You got Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Marines. And even though these individuals are not saying one word, they're communicating very proudly, very positively, with a lot of energy, right? Esprit de corps, sense of duty, sense of honor, sense of discipline. Lots of things are being communicated without any verbal communication. Now, let's take a look at this gentleman, right? This is somebody who may or may not be having a bad moment or a bad day. And if you were meeting with this person, you had a scheduled time to meet with them face to face, and you walked up and saw him like this, you might do an about face and go, maybe I should come back at a later time. Or you might say, sit down and go, hey, listen, is everything okay? Because it looks like you're troubled. And it might be a momentary thing, or it might be something more significant. And that may cause you to shift your conversation. Now, how about this lady? She's got a big smile on her face. She looks like she would allow anyone to interrupt her time to make time for them, because she is so positive in her energy. So you can see from all these images, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, people communicate with their actions. So now that we have that basis that everything communicates, let me give you some representations of what a brand is, because back a couple of decades ago, we used to think of brands really like in the consumer product space, and that was it. But truth be told, there are so many different ways of considering brands today. In fact, we are a brand. And so let me just give you some examples. This is the Veja brand. Veja may or may not be known to you, but it's a brand of leisure shoe that is made in Brazil by a company that's all about doing things with a sustainability and a free trade or a fair trade aspect to it. So they're interested in sustainability of the earth. So they're sourcing products from, rubber from Brazil, or cotton from South America. They're making sure that everybody gets paid a fair wage, and they're creating some really great products that people want to wear. So when we think about buying a product, more often than not, especially nowadays, we want to go beyond the product itself or the service itself to who is the company and what do they do, what do they represent, what's their story. Here's a great example of Coca-Cola. This is the quintessential example of a brand, right? I mentioned Coca-Cola because I worked at Coca-Cola. I'm a fan of Coca-Cola. I'm going to talk more about that brand as we go on in the presentation. How about this one? Star Wars, right? This started out as a movie back in the 1970s. Now it's a mega platform. You've got feature films, you've got games, you've got merchandise, you've got video, you've got things on your phone, apps, everything. It is really pervasive in many categories. How about this young character? I say young because he's about to celebrate 100 years old in 2028. Mickey Mouse was created in 1928, premier character of the Disney company, right? How about this brand? For many of us, it's aspirational. Some of us maybe actually own a Gucci purse or maybe piece of jewelry, but it inspires and aspires to a lot of people. How about this person, Beyonce Knowles, megastar, known throughout the world. When people, even if you don't like her music, you know who she is, you know what she stands for, and she has a significant presence. This is the India Premier League, right? Maybe not very big in the United States, but cricket in India is the #1 sport. They take this thing very seriously. Some matches go over more than one day, up to like, I think 3 days in length. So very big brand there. How about this person? This is Naomi Osaka. She won the US Open Championship, I think back in 2021. She just won her quarterfinal match the other night against Coco Gauff and is going into the semifinals, maybe playing even today, if I'm not mistaken. So she stands for a lot more than tennis, by the way. She is a mom, so that's a big presence for her. But also, she is supportive of fellow athletes, and she actually stood in the gap when an American athlete, female tennis player, had an altercation with another player, and she backed her up, which was really kind of a cool thing to see. And then lower right, many consider the GOAT, Lionel Messi, phenomenal soccer player, plays for Argentina, helped them win the World Cup a few years back, and also plays for the Miami MLS team. So these are examples of brands, and you can see there are so many variations, and you, of course, are one of them, and you need to think about yourself as a brand. So now we talked about everything communicates. We talked about what different representations of a brand are. Let me give you a non-technical, a non-jargony, if that is even a word, definition of a brand. So I'm going to kind of put this in a way that maybe it'll relate to you more than if you opened a textbook. So the first thing I want to share is that brands build relationships with us. Just like people build relationships with us, brands build relationships. So we're going to get into that hierarchy in a minute, but let me just show you here a picture of my automobile. This is an Acura MDX. I've had it forever, so I'm not going to tell you how old it is. But the reason I show it is because I have a relationship with my automobile. I drive it almost every day. I love it because it's incredibly reliable. After all, it's a Honda, right? It's an Acura, but Honda makes Acura. They never break. You just maintain them, right? Change the oil, do the routine maintenance. It keeps running. It's all-wheel drive, so I can drive in any kind of weather. When it snowed last, in the winter here in Atlanta, which it never snows, I'm out on the road cruising along with no problem. There's cars falling off to the right and the left because they don't have super handling four-wheel drive. It has 3 rows if I want. I can seat 7 people. I can put the 2 back rows down and haul a ton of stuff. So anyway, building a relationship. I have a tremendous relationship with this brand called Acura and my MDX. Now, I had a conversation with Matt earlier before we started this presentation about the Starbucks brand. And the reason we had the conversation is because brands build trust, right? When you go to a Starbucks, you know what you're going to get, whether it is the quality of the drink, the quality of the food, the consistency of both, or how you are treated by the employees. How about the app? You know every time you get on that app exactly what you're going to get. It's consistently surprising and surprisingly consistent. And so whether or not you're a fan of Starbucks, and by the way, this is not my favorite brand of coffee, but I do drink it on occasion. The reason I do is because when I can't get my favorite brand, I know that I can go to a Starbucks and know what I'm going to get versus taking a chance with some other coffee shop that may really disappoint me. When we have brands, a relationship with brands, they also add certainty to our lives. This is really important. I give the example here with Tylenol. Let's give a scenario where you're asked to take care of your niece. She's 4 years old. Your sister says she's been feeling a little bit off, but she'll be fine. They're going to go out to dinner, her and her husband. And if your niece starts to feel a little achy, your sister is giving you permission to give her some Tylenol. So they go off on their dinner date. A couple hours in, your niece starts to say she's feeling a little achy. You go to retrieve the Tylenol, and you find out that the container is empty. So fortunately, you're with your significant other. You send him or her off to the pharmacy to get some Tylenol, and she or he calls you back and says, there's no Tylenol for children here. What about the generic version? What do you say to them, or him or her? If it's me, I say, no way, get back in the car, go to another pharmacy, get children's Tylenol, because you're not going to trust your niece with some generic product, right? That's the certainty we're talking about. And when you have a relationship, when you have that trust, when you have that certainty, it eliminates risk, and we gladly pay up. I say gladly, we do it gladly for all of those things, right? You're getting way more than the product, way more than service. You're getting that relationship, that trust, that certainty, that elimination of risk, and you're building a relationship with something that maybe provides you a little cachet, right? I show the Apple brand here because Apple is definitely a premium brand in its category, and I personally am a fan of the Apple brand. I have an iWatch, an iPhone, a MacBook Pro. Everything I use is Apple, and I love the way it works. Now, you could be an Android user. I've got nothing against Android. It's just not for me. So that is a good sense of how brands relate to us. Now, let's talk about that hierarchy I mentioned earlier. So the first thing a brand needs to do is build awareness. If no one has heard of your brand, it does not exist. I'll repeat that again. If no one has never heard of your brand, it doesn't exist. So you have to build awareness. Now, Bitcoin 10 years ago was pretty unknown. Now it's really well known, but I show it because it has really grown in awareness over the last, decade or so. And many of us still don't have any Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, but a lot of us do. But we know about it even if we don't have it. The second thing is, after awareness is trial. You want someone to try your brand. So I show the Peloton brand here because for them, trial is really important because you're buying or renting way more than a piece of equipment. You're buying into a community, right? The Peloton community is a community of similar athletes who want to get fit and a similar levels of instructors who want to inspire them to get fit. So for Peloton, getting them on a piece of equipment, trying it out is hugely important. You want to do the same thing with your brand. And in fact, this conversation we're having, I'm actually giving you a chance to become aware of who I am, my brand, and try it out a little bit through this conversation today. I like to give the example with Costco because I love the Costco brand. And many of the reasons I love the Costco brand is because I can go in there on a Saturday mid-morning and basically get myself breakfast or lunch because of all the sampling that's done. And if I end up buying something, that's great, but they're not expecting that. They're just wanting me to try out their brand. After trial comes preference. Okay, you've built awareness, you've tried it out, now you're starting to like it. So here's an example of a brand called 100 Montaditos. It's a restaurant, a Spanish restaurant, originated in Spain, but through time has become very successful, and they have planted themselves in different countries. In fact, they're in several cities in the United States, I think, including Miami. And what you get here is way more than Spanish food. You get a whole Spanish experience, right? You kind of feel it's kind of like a tapas type of a food. And when you go there, you're going for the experience as much as you're going for the food. So What do I mean by the experience? Well, the ambiance, the way that the waiters and waitresses talk to you and what they say, the music, the menu, all of that is creating this preference. After preference, we build loyalty. What is loyalty? Loyalty says, I'm going to most often than not choose this brand over another. Now, if that brand is not available, I probably will go to an alternative, but I'd like to go to the one that I'm loyal to. So I show you here the Spotify brand. And for me, I'm not at this level of hierarchy with the Spotify brand. I like it. I have a preference for it. But you know who is? That's my daughter, Madeline. And I was on a road trip with her about a couple of years ago. She was doing a graduation trip around the country, and I got to join her for a week of it. And I'm driving the van with her on the right and her friend in the back. And I connect my phone because I want the navigation. And she asks if she can get on my phone and pull up the Spotify app because it's connected to the speaker system. And we start playing music that she likes. And after, I don't know, maybe 6 minutes, on comes an advertisement. And she looks at me and she's like, Dad, what is going on with you? Why did you not buy the subscription? Why are we listening to this ad? And I'm like, I'm sorry, Maddie. This is not my favorite brand. So she's like, I'm swapping out. I'm putting my phone into the speaker system. We'll use mine for navigation also. So she is loyal to the Spotify brand. After loyalty comes insistence. Insistence says, you will not accept a substitute. I show the Coca-Cola brand here because when I go to a restaurant and I'm feeling like a Coke, and that's not very often, but there's an occasion when I do, maybe for lunch on a Saturday with my wife, I'll go and I'll order a Coke. And if I'm in a restaurant that doesn't serve it and they say, I'm sorry, is Pepsi okay? I say, no, it's not. What else you got? Probably I'll drink a water or a lemonade or an iced tea, but I'm not drinking a Pepsi because I am brand insistent. After insistence comes advocacy. This is where you will put your reputation at risk to advocate a brand to a friend or to a colleague or to someone, maybe even a stranger, because you believe so much in the brand that it won't tarnish your reputation, but it'll actually enhance it. So I'm showing here an example of the Tesla brand. I don't own a Tesla, but I aspire to, and I've driven in one with a friend of mine who showed me all of its bells and whistles. And I got to tell you, being in a Tesla, going from 0 to 60 is like being on the end of the runway in a Navy jet. I mean, it is a thrill, it is exciting, and it is a car that, let's face it, if I don't have to fill up my tank every couple of weeks, that saves me some money, but also it saves me time, which is a big deal. The last one, and by the way, I did not come up with all of these. This came out of a marketing textbook, but the last one I've actually coined is called ownability. And ownability says, I believe the brand is mine. You may have stewardship of it. You might have technical legal rights to it, but it's my brand. And we all know about people who are fanatical about the brand to the point where they believe it's theirs, right? Back in the 1980s, Coca-Cola changes their secret formula. What happened? A big uproar happened, and they changed it back because they listened to the consumers who believed they owned the brand. We saw that recently also with Cracker Barrel, right? They changed their logo. And what happened? The world went crazy because nobody really did the research to see whether or not that Cracker Barrel logo aligned with the brand and how passionate those people were that felt that they owned that Cracker Barrel brand and that the people that worked at Cracker Barrel were only stewards. So I show the cool brand here. It is a really neat type of lifestyle apparel. Actually, it's a high performance lifestyle. When I was actually speaking the last time at Patriot Boot Camp, I talked about the cool brand and somebody in the audience was actually wearing it. So pretty cool to see that happen. Okay, so we've gone through hierarchy. We've gone through everything communicates. We talked about what brands look like. We talked about hierarchy. Now let's talk about you and your brand and why the word why is more important than what and how. And we're gonna get into this very quickly, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm gonna pause for a drink of water so that I can continue to talk. By the way, you may notice this is a Yeti brand. I love the Yeti brand, and also I have my Naval Academy crest on it. All right, why is more important than why is more important than what and how? Here are two individuals, well known, right? Very different, but what they have in common is they have a clear understanding of their purpose. They have a clear understanding of their why. So in the case of Oprah Winfrey, the founder of the OWN network, she says, she has a passion to bring happiness and a sense of fulfillment into every home through television and to make the world a better place through philanthropy. And I would say she's lived out that brand over the last 4 or 5 decades. It is consistent with who she is. She does not waver from that. Now, Elon Musk, very different, founder of Tesla, founder of SpaceX, doing a lot of other things. He has a passion for more clean and sustainable sources of energy for a more sustainable world, right? He wants to put a spaceship on Mars and make that a colony. So we have other places to live at some point in the future. But great big thinkers in both cases, very different, but very clear on their purpose. All right. Now that we understand that why is more important than what and how, I want to pose a few questions to you that I want you to consider and answer maybe at another time on your own. So the first one is upper left-hand corner, why do you exist? And I show a picture here of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, and you can see here God reaching out to man, this is Adam, and trying to make that connection. And the verse here is, so God created man in his own image. For me, I say, why do I exist? Because I'm a child of God, and I'm on this planet for his glory to fulfill my small part in his bigger story. And this is part of the way I do that. But you have to ask that question and answer it for yourself. Next, why do you do what you do? That is a very important question. Steve Jobs said he wanted to remove the barrier of having to learn. If we look at the equipment, the different kinds of products that Apple makes, what we mostly have seen, and this is my own personal experience, is that children are not intimidated by Apple products. In fact, they're happy to grab their mom's iPhone or even iPad and get on it and play their favorite video and go to the next one and go to the next one. And so Steve Jobs did a masterful job of removing the barrier of having to learn. And Apple continues to today, well past his existence, right? Unfortunately, he died a few years back, but they continue to excel in this one area. The next is why someone should work with you. Not why should you work with them, and that's a very important question to ask and answer. But this one is why should someone work with you? And when I say work, I don't mean necessarily be an employee in your company, although that could be the case, but it could be a colleague, it could be another company, could be somebody that a neighbor working alongside you doing a project. Why should they work with you? You need to ask that question and answer it. In this case, Truett Cathy said he wanted to honor God and help people. Well, that's a pretty lofty goal. And if a company is espousing to do that, you can probably guess that most of the people working there, if they've done it with rigor, are going to be of high character. And so for me, if I was considering working at a quick service restaurant like Chick-fil-A, I would consider them over their peers because of this standard set by Truett Cathy when he founded the company. The last question is why they should care about you, not why you should care about them. Again, another good question to ask and answer, but why should they care about you? In this case, this is a picture of some Navy SEALs, and their mission is to conduct military actions that are beyond the capability of conventional military forces. So they are driven by a loftier goal, right? If you are, and hopefully this never happens, but if you're caught by some terrorists and you're in a hidden place and the Navy SEALs get tasked with recovering you or rescuing you, you know that they're going to put their body between you and the enemy to protect you and to rescue you. And they're doing that because of this higher mission that they have. So this is the last question that you need to ask and answer for yourself. Okay, we've gone over a lot of things. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the idea of communicating your expertise and experience clearly in terms that other can understand. So you need to ask those questions, answer those questions, and then put them in a way that other people can understand. I'm going to give you two examples that are representative of what I'm talking about. Now, I will say, when you talk to your target audience and tell them your story, you should do it where they're at when they want to hear from you. Let me repeat that. You should tell your story to your target audience where they're at when they want to hear from you. So don't be telling them your story where they're at when they don't want to hear from you, because that will be annoying. So here we go. First one is a professional LinkedIn profile. I'm giving you an example of mine just because I think I've done a decent job here. This is just the top portion of it. You can see there's a banner in the back that has my company name, and the question that I pose is, are you writing a story that makes your brand come alive in the hearts of those you serve? I want to pose that question to everyone who ever comes to my LinkedIn profile or stumbles upon it. And then you can see there, I've written the book, Expand, Grow, Thrive. It's an award-winning book. I'm also a TEDx speaker, and I have that logo there. And then just the top part, this is a little hack. When you go onto your profile, it'll ask for your first name and your last name. So for me, I put my first name as my full name, Pete Canalichio, and my last name, I put brand strategist. That way, it comes out as Pete Canalichio - brand strategist, so people know right away what I stand for, what my mission is. And one other thing I want to show you here is there's a little speaker here. Now, my name can be challenging to pronounce, and so there's an opportunity on LinkedIn to do a recording. So I not only pronounce my name so people can understand it, but I tell them what I do through this. And I don't know if it's going to be clicked on very often, but if someone were to do that, they would hear from me in my own voice those things. And then the last thing I put down here is my mission. I'm equipping overcomers everywhere with brand strategy, brand expansion, and brand licensing tools, talks, workshops, and coaching to enable them to compete with the big guys. I'm trying to tell them, hey, I want to talk to you and help you, small business to mid-sized business owner, compete with the bigger companies, and you can do that, and I'm here to help you along the way. Now, the second one is I want to show you is a personal website. The difference between these two is I don't own the rights to my LinkedIn profile. My content is there, but LinkedIn can change their mind anytime and change things completely. In fact, they could go out of business and the whole thing could come down, and I would be in a bad place. You might have remembered, I think a couple of years ago, there was talk about getting rid of TikTok because of the implications with the country of China. Well, a lot of people have their whole business on TikTok, and they cried foul and said, please don't do that because you could wipe me out. Well, that's the problem when you are on a platform that you don't own. Not to say don't use them, but just be aware of that. So personal website, you own it. It's yours. You can do anything you want with it. Just make sure you continue to re-register it so that you don't lose those rights. So here's an example with a person named Janet Mock. I like this because it's very clean, right? There's different sections about books, press, speaking events, I'm having trouble reading that list word, podcast, contact, and some basic communication points. Trailblazing storyteller. She has published 2 best-selling memoirs about her journey as a trans woman. And then there's some details at the bottom, like some specific statistics that she has. So very clear here on who she is and what she stands for. That's what we want to do with our own website. All right, we're almost at the end of the formal presentation. We can open up to questions shortly. But the one thing I want you to remember is once you understand that everything communicates, you've created your own brand strategy, which is something that can come from this talk we're doing today, is to develop your brand strategy. Then you want to communicate that brand strategy with ruthless consistency. And I'm going to give you an example of someone who's done that, in my opinion. This is the tennis player Roger Federer. He no longer plays competitively, but he still plays in events. But he's also a mega brand that's going to be around for decades. And that's why I like to showcase him, because he is still gaining tremendous volume of followers on social media. I think it's north of 20 million right now. He is still one of the top, if not the most revenue generating athlete, tennis athlete on the planet, and athlete in general. And he's done it because of his ruthless consistency in the way that he's represented his brand over the last quarter of a century. Whether he's on a tennis court holding a racket, or out to dinner, or representing the Rolex brand, or maybe even a brand of champagne, or on merchandise, or hugging a ball boy or girl, he has this ruthless consistency, and he gives back, right? He has his own foundation. He supports things that are meaningful to him. And what you can see in every one of these, and why brands are very attracted to him and will pay him a lot of money to represent him, is because of that consistency. Now, what I can tell you is he's never going to represent a brand that isn't consistent with who he is, what his character is, what his brand attributes are, what his brand promise is, right? The two go hand in hand, and that's the way we need to think about our own brands. All right. I've written a book called Your Brand is a Promise. You don't have to send a code to me on my website. But what you can do is just let Matt or any of the folks at DAV Patriot Boot Camp, Caffeine Connect, let them know that you would like a copy of my product, my book, Your Brand is Promise, and I'll send you a digital copy. You can buy a physical copy on Amazon, but that's a little bit more challenging for me. So if you want a copy, happy to send it to you digitally. If you want a physical copy, you can go on Amazon and find it there. All right, let me stop share and entertain your questions.
Pete, you drew upon so many things that I remember from business school when we were talking about branding and marketing and things like that. So I'm actually curious because other people might be, wondering the difference. Can you explain a little bit more about what is the difference between branding versus marketing?
Yeah, great question, Matt. And this is one that is very confusing to many, many people, and understandably so, because they kind of go hand in hand. But when you think about branding, branding is a representation of who you or your company is, right? So when I talk about building a brand strategy, I talk about defining your story, whether it's your own personal story or your company's story. And that story has to include the inflection points. The inflection points really reveal what you're about, who you are, what you value, what you believe. And those beliefs and values, they influence and impact your brand architecture. Brand architecture is attributes and then benefits, functional benefits to your target audience, emotional benefits to your target audience. They talk about your brand promise. And then we talk about the last thing, which is positioning, right? That is, who is your target audience at a very psychographic level. So you might want to know whether, what their gender is, how old they are, maybe even their ethnicity. But what's really more important is how they think and how they feel, and what their problem is, and how you're going to solve it, and why your solution is better than your competition. That is branding. And when you build over time a relationship, as we talked about, that is establishing your brand reputation, your brand attributes. Now, marketing is telling your brand story to your target audience, where they're at, when they want to hear from you. So they do go hand in hand. And sales is part of that too, right? Because a lot of times people are like, well, he works in sales and marketing. Well, marketing and sales are very different. The way that I've been told it, and I like this, is marketing brings someone to the dance. Sales makes them dance, so marketing brings them to the dance floor. The sales folks get them to dance. So branding is about who you are, what your persona is, building a relationship with your target audience by being authentic. And then marketing is communicating that story and your attributes to your target audience. Hopefully that helps.
No, it does. And I'm curious. So many people might have a logo. And would that be that their brand, or is that something different? Where does the logo fit into, that matrix of branding, marketing, sales, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, great question. I hear this all the time, and unfortunately, we don't know enough to know that a logo is not a brand, a jingle is not a brand, a tagline is not a brand. Those are representations of a brand. So what happens is, a lot of times somebody wants to start a company, They're like, okay, I need to name my company. And the first thing I need to do after naming my company is to create a logo because I have to communicate who I am to the world, right? But what happens is they haven't gone through those questions and answers that we just talked about of developing a brand strategy. They've either sent off their name to maybe someone they know who dabbles in design, or maybe they found somebody on Fiverr, or maybe they've even got onto AI and said, "Hey, ChatGPT or some other platform, Gemini, help me create a logo." Well, the problem with that is unless you've asked and answered those questions, you are not representing the brand visually. And by the way, a logo is just one part of a visual identity. If you've ever thought about or seen any brand that you love, they are so much more than the logo, right? There's all of these visual images, there's maybe even sound or even smell. Those are all part of the representation of a brand. So a logo is one piece, but if you don't know the brand strategy, then the logo will never represent that. And like for example, FedEx, right? If you look at that logo, um, it might just look like 5 letters, but if you look at it again, you'll see there's an arrow in between the word Fed and the word X. And that, once you've seen that image of that arrow, you'll never forget it. And that was purposely designed in the logo to communicate what they do, which is get your product to its recipient with extreme accuracy in an extreme short amount of time. And you're happy to pay more, as I said earlier, for that privilege.
I appreciate that, P. And you answered, or you started speaking a little bit about brand strategy. And I know you spoke so much about branding, but if someone's coming in at the end, or if you had to summarize what are the core elements, whether it's three, five, whatever the magic number is, what would you say are the core elements of a brand strategy?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I like to simplify things. That's my goal. The book, Your Brand is a Promise. I've worked really hard at eliminating all jargon to just communicate, in the simplest terms as possible. So I say that a brand strategy is really 3 elements, or 3 legs to a stool. The first one is brand story. And I say for entrepreneurs, the brand story of the organization or the company starts with your story. So I like to have people, write down their story. What are the things they remember, those key inflection points from 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30. If you're older than that, go by decade by decade. And then when did you launch your company? And then what are the key inflection points in your company? So brand story is the first piece. Then brand architecture is the second piece. So that is beliefs, values, attributes, functional benefits, core message, emotional benefits, and brand promise, right? Those are the things that describe what the brand is and how the target audience, how the individual or consumer or user are going to benefit from your brand. And then the last one is let's get real clarity on who it is you're actually trying to help. Get to know them at a very rich level. That's why I say telling a story about yourself is very important, because what happens is, and this is Simon Sinek, so let me make sure that everyone knows I'm borrowing a little bit from his thinking, is people buy based on the why of the company or the individual. So they see why that company or person is motivated to do what they do, and then they connect with that. So, for example, I love the Patagonia brand not just because the products are amazingly comfortable and wear incredibly well, but because of all the other things, right? Like if that product is worn out, you can send it back to them and they will give you another version of it. But they're also very, very interested in the sustainability of our planet. So they are actively spending time making sure that their part in the contribution of the product they make is helping the planet. So I like that part just as much as the product, the piece of apparel. And so that's why I buy it. So we need to know who the target audience is, and then what is the problem that they have that you're going to solve, and then why are you better than the competition? The competition could be doing nothing. Like I have your solution, or I can choose to sit on my couch, or I can do it myself, or I could go to a direct competitor or something in between, some substitute. Why should I choose you? What is the value proposition you're offering? And then what are your proof points? How can you make the claim that you're all those things you just told me you are without some justification? So I had the pleasure of helping a classmate of mine from the Naval Academy who was a female astronaut and a career Navy officer write her brand strategy. She would be a speaker to young audiences, to professionals, people in mid-career transition. And what I said was her proof points were she could talk about her career and being an astronaut, but the thing that was so compelling was she could give a perspective from outside of in outer space that was also a female perspective. So she was one of 60 people at the time that ever had been outside of outside of Earth's atmosphere, and she could give that perspective in her talks, and that was a heck of a proof point for what she communicated.
I love that. And if I'm, following along and doing this properly, it is a part of your own personal brand that you care about. So if I see you in a Patagonia sweatshirt, hoodie, whatever, that represents something about you. I can look at you and know, Pete, your personal branding, you care about sustainability, you care about the environment, and you're willing to pay a little bit of a premium to support something like that. So just connecting the dots a little bit, that's a part of your own personal brand. Am I right on
100%.
that kind of?
Oh, spot on. And
Okay.
just to give a proof point of that, in high school, I think most schools require that somebody participate in the science fair, right? So I was forced to do that in 10th grade, kind of like most probably students, kind of waited till the last week or so to get something to
No, never, Pete. I cannot believe it.
But I had such a positive experience from that. I decided my senior year to do it again. And this time I had been reading about solar energy. This was decades ago. And I was like, wow, you mean there's a sun out there that we don't pay for, that we can capture its energy and for free and use it to better our planet. So I did a whole project on solar energy and I was fortunate enough to win the regional championship and I actually went to the International Science Fair in Cleveland, Ohio, just north of you guys. Fortunately, one of my classmates also went, and her father and mother came, and we went to Niagara Falls when we had a day off. So I actually had a good trip out of that. But I
That's
share all that because I've had this passion for sustainability back to when I was, 16, 17 years old.
nice. Um, so we have a question here, and I think a lot of people, hopefully, that are watching are building their own businesses, that are applying for grants, that are applying for capital, etc. And the question's about how much of branding should be within your pitches and description of your company if you're applying for grants, funding, and things like this.
Yeah, I don't think you can not have it. Because when you are not branded, what ultimately happens is you're competing purely on a generic opportunity. You're basically competing on price. You've not told your target audience, in this case, maybe the people that are giving you your grant, why you're different, better, more special than anyone else. And you really haven't maybe done a good job of describing the target audience you're trying to help. So I believe it's at the core. I say there's kind of one step before branding. That's to define your purpose, your vision, and your mission. After that, develop your brand strategy because it gives you that North Star into everything that you do. And those people that you're talking to will see that clarity, will know that you're acting with strategic thinking, and will buy into what you're trying to create more meaningfully than if you don't do it.
Sorry, I lost my mouse there for a second. I'm used to having the little mouse pad. I'm using the screen on this one. Well, Pete, I mean, that is a lot to digest. I think that you covered so much about the importance of branding and how, like you said, we're always communicating. We're always representing ourselves, and we never know, when we are talking, you never know who could be a potential stakeholder in your company, who could be a potential client that you sell with, potential advocate, potential person you want to hire. You never know. So it's always, best to just make sure that whatever you've decided for your personal brand, that, you're consistent, like you said, and stay with it. Um, I've loved this kind of stuff. I believe in a former life, I was a marketing expert. But right now I get the pleasure of working with, people like you that want to support our amazing program. Speaking of our amazing program, I want to remind everyone that registration is still open for participants. Now, it's not going to be open that much longer, so please visit our website, patriotbootcamp.org. We have that upcoming cohort in October where we have tons of amazing mentors like Pete come offer their consultation, their advice, their advisement, all this excellent stuff, as well as, speakers on all these different core competencies and topics about entrepreneurship. So please get that application in done because we only have a couple weeks left. So I just want to make sure you secure your spot. Additionally, in regards to our Caffeine Connect, coming up September 18th, we have Tony Brown. He's going to give a presentation on from service to sales. So, how to win clients with a mission-driven mindset. Great complement to where we're just talking about branding here. Now we take that and go to sales, which I think is, going down right in the road of that. So please follow us on all of our Patriot Bootcamp and DAV socials. Thanks again for joining us today. Let's build.
Thank you so much. It was really great to be here, and hopefully I'll see some of you in October at the DAV headquarters for Patriot Boot Camp.